In the final two videos of this series, I'm going to be looking at a material imbalance situation where one side has a rook against a minor piece, a bishop in this case, and in these cases where the pawns are symmetrical, it's generally quite easy for the side that's down material to hold a draw. And the reason for this isn't perhaps too hard to understand. Like if you've seen the techniques that the stronger side with an extra rook has generally used in the earlier videos to win, has been like bullying around the weaker side's king, like pushing it to the edge and then sacrificing for a pawn, and things like that. But when the weaker side has an extra piece, he doesn't have to actually give way with the king, and he can just move that piece around instead, just however he fancies. And it's hard for the rook to really stamp its authority. The only ways it can generally win against a minor piece when the pawns are symmetrical, like this situation, are if it can invade before the king has enough breathing room. So for example, if I could just plonk this rook down on f7, then black would be losing, because you'd just be it would be too close to its pawns to survive. A second way would be if you could force the win of the bishop and a pawn for the rook. So for example, if the rook could go to e6, this square that's highlighted on the board, then black would pretty much be forced, in order to avoid rook e8, to play bishop e7, and then rook takes f7 would leave white with a winning king and pawn endgame, because he'd follow up with f4 and create a passed pawn. And the third way is to force an imbalance in the pawn structure, and usually this only happens if the weaker side is a bit careless, or if the position is kind of favourable to start with, which in this case it really isn't. So an example of how white could play in this situation would be rook a6, heading for that e6 square, hoping that black does something a little bit silly. But if black's careful, there are a number of moves that he can use here to draw the game. Bishop b6 looks like a sensible move, or h5 I'm going to take as my main line, just making some space around the king. And after the rook comes in, g5, check, black now has enough space with his king, so he's avoided that first, basically the first two, so it's no longer reasonable for white to either explode the king, because it's too close to pawns, or to win the bishop and a pawn for the rook. This bishop is now just going to head out over here, and just waste some time on these dark squares, waiting for white to advance the pawns. So white should advance the pawns in such a way that he can try to create an imbalance. If he was here to play the move g4, this would be completely fine for black, because now whichever capture white does, black will simply make the other capture. So after bishop a5, if white captures this way, hoping to push this pawn, black will just won't allow it. He'll play the other capture, and if after bishop a5 white was to push this pawn, black would push this pawn, and with all these pawns in a row like this, now black is ready to keep the symmetry whatever capture white makes. So although black is holding a draw relatively comfortably here, the best chance would be, I think, to play f4, and this is aiming to capture on g5, which would then mean that black would not be able to keep the symmetry anymore, because g4 would be coming. Now in the next video we're going to see what happens if black simply allows f takes g5 and plays the move bishop a5. This will be the starting point of the next video, but in this one I'm just going to show how black should really defend to keep things much simpler. And there are a number of ways you can do it here. You can play g4. This means that after f5 the pawns stay symmetrical, and if white was to capture on e5, he's simply ready, because he's controlling this e5 square, and he's ready for white's next pawn advance, and that will secure a draw. Also he could capture either e takes f4 and again he's ready for e5, or play g takes h4. Now white can play f takes e5, so these pawns are all on different files. However, black is ready for any advance, so he can simply move his bishop. He's threatening to win the game with that move. After the king back, just move the bishop, and he's ready for any white pawn advance. Therefore white can't make any progress, and black has secured a draw.